fourth episode of Unlocking the Secrets of Autism. Today, I'd like to reintroduce our hosts. My name is Karen Raposa. This is Russell Raposa. And we have Michael Dressler and Amy Dressler as our co-hosts of the show. Thanks for tuning in again. And today, we're really excited because we have a very special guest with us, Sarah St. Peter. Sarah is a BCBA, and she'll tell us a little bit more about what that means. But she is the clinical coordinator, or one of the clinical coordinators at Amigo, which is a school in Attleboro, Massachusetts. And she has a very special role there. So we're excited to have her. And
thank you.
We'll be asking Sarah lots of questions so we can learn more about what she does at Amigo and the great work that she does. So first, Sarah, please explain to all of us what BCBA stands for and your educational background in order to have that title.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for having me. First and foremost, BCBA stands for Board Certified, I can't even talk, Board Certified Behavior Analyst. So that is a master's level clinician. So you have to have a degree in applied behavior analysis. Some have degrees in special education with an applied behavior analysis background. But you have, your master's degree, and then you take a board exam. So that's a national and international board exam. And there are also BCBADs, which are BCBAs with doctorates. And BCABAs, so there's just tons of letters, but BCABAs are assistant BCBAs.
So it's all board certified, is
Yes.
what you're saying. And so internationally, this is a degree that you can obtain?
Yeah, so it's the test that you have to take, and it's a board certification that it's kind of like dentistry, for example.
Yeah.
There's boards and you sit for the board, so it's kind of separate from your actual degree.
Okay.
So I could have a master's in applied behavior analysis but not pass the boards, so I wouldn't have that board certification.
I see. Okay. And where did you do your school? Where did you go to school?
I went to undergrad at Allegheny College in Meadville, Pennsylvania.
That is, yeah.
Yes, wonderful school. That's where I first started to learn about ABA and behaviorism. I was a psychology undergrad there and loved it, and kind of caught the bug of behavior analysis and learned about what was available as far as opportunities. After graduating, immediately after I moved from Pennsylvania up to Massachusetts to take a job as an assistant teacher at Amigo School, where I also worked at Best Clinical, which is their home service network. Mm-hmm. And I did home services there, social skills, early intervention, all of those great experiences while I was getting my master's degree. Was a case manager, and then passed my boards and graduated in May of 2017. And that's when I became the clinical coordinator.
Okay.
So I've been doing that ever since. Yeah.
That's great. And why do you think this field? Did you grow up with someone who you were trying to learn or understand their behaviors, or what was it that got you interested?
It's funny. I feel like I'm one of the few people who doesn't have somebody that I met. I was part of the Best Buddies in school and volunteered in some of those opportunities, but I really fell in love with the science of behaviorism. I knew that I loved science and I loved helping people, and I just wasn't sure how they were going to connect.
Wow.
I thought maybe a guidance counselor, I thought maybe a teacher, a science teacher or something, and then found psychology, but that wasn't quite clicking for me, and then I found behaviorism. And so I took the job at Amigo not knowing much about autism at all, actually, and so that was such a learning opportunity for me. I learned so much so quickly and just fell in love with the population. It's just such a special group of individuals. There's nothing like the realness in an interaction with some of my students and my kids, all of my kids really. There's no fake anything. All your interactions are so genuine, and I just love the genuine joy that that they just radiate, and it's been such a pleasure getting to, help them change their lives and help them, acquire skills and see those maladaptive behaviors decrease. It really is what gets me up every day,
I love that she says my kids.
I know.
Oh, man.
Yeah, that's great. So we have many more questions for you. Russ, did you want to?
Yes, I was going to say, Sarah, could you explain to us and the audience what ABA actually is and what it stands for?
Yeah, ABA stands for Applied Behavior Analysis. So it takes that science of behaviorism, you think about Skinner and all of those people way back, and it applies it to, specific situations. And it's not just, individuals on the autism spectrum that, ABA can be used for. Everything from organizational behavioral management, working in, businesses, making businesses more effective, to, just lots of different things. Anything you could think of, really, it can apply to. I use it on myself all the time when I'm trying to get myself to the gym, or, yeah, absolutely, or, trying to make myself eat healthier and all those things. So it applies to so many different things. But applied behavior analysis is just taking that science of behaviorism and applying it to something specific, kind of like a behavioral engineer, and using it to, utilizing the principles of ABA to address specific socially significant problems in somebody's life, or to increase adaptive skills.
One of my favorite stories about ABA and how it changed Tommy for us, we would ask him to smile to take a picture, and he'd be like this, and we'd, smile, Tommy, smile, and that's all we would get. And I asked if through ABA, could they teach him, when somebody says smile, what does that mean? And it's hysterical now, because when you say smile, Tommy, he goes, it's like he really learned it through ABA.
Oh,
and he would never have that simple skill that people take for granted. He wouldn't have learned it if he didn't have that opportunity to learn it with the ABA method.
And like the repetition.
So a lot of it, right, is learning through teaching people through making. It's kind of a repeated effort.
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's so many different, and it's so hard for me to think about how I could possibly even describe truly what ABA is, because there's just so many aspects, and there's so many teaching methodologies, and so much that goes into something like that. But basically it boils down to the use of reinforcement, punishment, which sounds scary, but isn't always. It's just something that decreases a maladaptive behavior, or any behavior, over time. Touching a stove and burning yourself is punishing, that sort of thing. And then extinction, which just means removing all reinforcement from something.
Right.
So it's a lot, and it's really confusing, but it applies to so many different things. So, you're teaching your son that in the presence of this phrase or this set of variables, you're going to engage in that behavior, and it produces reinforcement. So I'm going to keep on doing it. I'm sure they use some sort of reinforcement, even if it was just verbal reinforcement, like great job smiling, way to go, you look great, or showing him the picture, or any of those things.
Yeah, my scary thing is food as a reinforcer.
I was going to say that.
We just had our last episode talked about dentistry and how that can be a real problem for some individuals when the reward, especially through ABA, if it's repetitive like that and it's constantly food. So we were talking about what some other things might be that you can use to reward people.
Like all day.
Yeah,
Like
right. Food all day.
Food or gummies.
In a lot of ways, not a
whatever
good
it
thing.
is.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, absolutely. It definitely should not be the first option in any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah.
No.
So that ABA seems to be something that people with autism tend to learn better through that type of analysis. Is that correct?
Well, I think it's fair to say that it's one of the most effective. I think there are other effective strategies. Of course, I like it the best, but I think there's such a wide evidence base for the use of using ABA teaching methodologies, with people with developmental disabilities, autism spectrum disorder particularly, just from all ends of the spectrum, from working on, little social behaviors to, decreasing really extreme maladaptive behaviors. There's just such a breadth of information and evidence base for the use with that particular population. Yeah, absolutely.
That's great.
So in regards to ABA, so I was going to ask you the question about what kind of education do you need for teaching someone with using ABA?
So there is, my BCBA level and above, which is the BCBA-D. And so our role is to train and teach everybody else who would work with the particular
Just
client.
ABA.
Yeah, so we would teach paraprofessionals, and we do work with teachers and other professionals, therapy, speech, OT, PT, and we would work with them to train everybody to run a program a particular way, and we teach them about what is ABA and how do we utilize reinforcement effectively here and those sort of things.
What's the length of program? If I wanted to be in that program, how long would it take me to
become a BCBA?
Yeah.
Well, it all depends, but it's generally, at the least amount of time that it could take is 2 years. So that, it's a master's and there's a whole bunch of experience hours and supervision that you can get a bunch of different ways. You can do it directly in a setting like Amigo School, and have somebody supervise you while you're doing that kind of work. And then you have to pass the big, scary board exam that is pretty difficult to pass. Yeah. So that can take a long time sometimes.
Yeah. So that sort of answered a little bit of my question, but I was going to ask you, if you could explain to everyone that you've told us what BCBA means and what ABA means, but how they relate to each other as far as in your educational plan, the difference between the two.
Yeah. Yeah, you mean the difference between like an IEP and like a...
No, how the BCBA is different than the person giving the ABA.
Oh, I gotcha. Yeah, it's more of a supervisory role.
Okay.
The BCBA oversees all of the behavior programming, and so that is
Are
just...
they giving them the plan? They're giving
Yes.
the
So
ABA therapist the plan.
analyze the behavior, I write the plan, and then I teach them to run the plan, and then we do a bunch of role plays and those sort of things, and then like giving.
So you're
in the
analyzing
moment,
the data.
analyzing the data, observing the staff, providing feedback regularly, and all of that. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's an ongoing process, never ending. Yeah.
So Sarah, I know ABA is often recommended, and we can get into how many hours and things like that, but it seems like that's the thing that's most commonly recommended for people on the autism spectrum. Is there data? Is that the reason? Is there research that supports this? Like, where is the root of all of the discussion about why people with autism need to be taught and ABA needs to be used and it's effective? Where does that come from?
I think it comes from just the lots and lots of research that
Years
comes
and
from,
years.
just that comes from seeing so much success across so many kids. We know that every child on the autism spectrum is different. And so one of the big pros about ABA is that it's different for every single child. You would never run the same exact program or the same behavior support plan for two different children. It just would never happen that way because everyone's so individual. So I think it works so well for autism spectrum disorder because everybody on the spectrum is just so different and everybody has different strengths, and that's kind of one of our strengths is playing to people's specific needs, I think.
So you can individualize the program, and no matter how individual it is, it's still considered an ABA program, and so that's why it sounds like that's where the drive is, because there are so many things that are sometimes recommended for people with autism, and some people have success with them and some people don't. But you seem to hear that this ABA helps pretty much everybody, no matter where they are on the spectrum, can benefit from those types of programs.
I believe so. I do.
And that you're saying that the research over years and years and years supports that as well, and that's why we tend to hear it.
Yeah, yeah, it's just wildly effective. I mean, there's so much that we don't know about autism spectrum disorder yet, and you know, we're just really great problem solvers in a lot of ways. That's kind of what we do. I use the term engineer a lot just because I think that is the way people understand problem solvers in society in a lot of ways. And so that is kind of what we're doing. We're taking a particular set of problems and strengths and weaknesses at hand, and we're designing something to make that individual's life better. You know, finding the most socially significant things that we can target. You were talking about smiling, for example. That's really socially significant. I mean, every school picture, every, you know.
In life, every picture.
Right. Yeah.
In life, yeah.
Right. Right. I just thinking about school pictures because it's always hilarious to try to get the kids to
That must be quite entertaining.
Yes. Oh, yes, yes,
You know,
yes.
you were saying, Tommy, you would say smile, and Brent, whenever we get a camera out, he goes, say cheese, and just reads it on. And he actually says, say cheese inside.
That's awesome.
It'll get them to smile. That's for
Somebody
sure.
must have said that enough times to him because
That's
cheese.
great. That's great.
Boy.
That's
So-
really great.
Yeah, Sarah, could you tell us, you hear ABA a lot. FBA, what is FBA? Actually, I don't even think I know what FBA is.
I do.
So,
An FBA
Enlighten
is
us.
a functional behavior assessment. So we look at particular target behaviors for increase or decrease, and then we figure out the function or the why that somebody engages in that behavior. So that can be done a ton of different ways. There's lots of different techniques we might use, like, you know, long-term analysis of data. If we see over time that a specific behavior is decreasing consistently over time, you know, with a particular intervention, that, you know, provides evidence that we're working on the correct function. If behavior is super variable all over the place, maybe we haven't found the exact right function yet. You know, we might look at ABC data is a common thing that people hear sometimes. ABC stands for antecedent, behavior, and consequence. So what comes before a behavior, the behavior itself, and then after the behavior. And so ABA focuses a lot on how the environment interacts with the behavior. So what's going on in the environment when the behavior occurs, and then what happens after the behavior kind of helps us unlock the secret about why the behavior might occur. And that's a really common way that we'll form a hypothesis. We can test that hypothesis a variety of ways, but that's one of the things we use. Another thing is called an FA, or a functional analysis, and the two get confused a lot. A functional analysis is really more of an experimental manipulation of the behavior. And so that is, you know, we're not going to use that all the time for a couple of reasons. The first being that it can be dangerous to increase a behavior sometimes because you're reinforcing it in that moment to figure out the function. And so all of those types of methodologies can be combined in a functional behavior assessment to help determine the function, which will then, you know, allow recommendations to be made, and then a behavior support plan is put in place, where people have lots of different words for behavior support plan, behavior intervention plan, all of those things can be formed to target the behavior in a consistent way. ABA is all about consistency, doing something the same way every single time to test whether it works or not. And so, you know, a behavior intervention plan, behavior support plan can be created after an FBA is complete.
So if we try to give our audience an example of this,
Yeah.
just to, you know, in case people who are watching are trying to figure this out, I'm thinking to myself, if you have a child that's hitting their face, so you would do an analysis. You'd look at when the person hits their face, what happened right before they hit their face, and what happened after, what was the consequence, and to try to figure out, in other words, people who are nonverbal very often use behavior as language to speak.
Absolutely.
And so an FBA may allow people to understand what is that person trying to say. They can't speak it, so what are they trying to tell me when they hit their face? And so you're looking at, did a person walk in the room every time, a specific person, before that person hit their face? Oh, it's that person maybe that they're trying to say, there's something about that person, whether it's their perfume, whether it's the color they're wearing, something like that.
Right.
Or I hit my face, and right after I hit my face, somebody gives me a cookie.
Because they're like, hey, stop. Yeah, exactly.
So am I explaining that
Yes.
as a good example
Absolutely.
to people of why it's so important that these types of analyses be done, especially on people who cannot express themselves well? Very often you're trying to figure out, what are they trying to say?
Yes, absolutely.
Is that an accurate
No, it's a
example?
Great example. And then, from there, if we determined, for example, that it's always during some sort of demand, somebody's asked them to do something, right?
Okay.
Then we could, create an intervention based off of that fact. We're like, okay, we've realized it's always demands now. And then every time Johnny hits his face, they pause and take the demand away and say, oh, do you need a minute? And so maybe that's
Teaching a new skill to use instead of that.
Maybe
Okay.
the fact that they're saying, do you need a minute, is increasing the behavior because he's escaped
I see.
momentarily.
I
So
see.
we might teach him to escape in a different way before,
Yes.
the demand or something like that. We might decrease demands at the beginning as a strategy while we teach a new skill. It depends
So the support plan is, okay, we've figured it out, and here's now what we're going to do to help that person communicate in a better way.
Right.
Okay. all
Which
right.
is then what we teach all the staff to do.
Well, along that line, so my next question would be, why is it important to understand the behaviors and what they might mean?
Yeah.
So that's the question that goes along with this whole thing.
So people, no matter who we are, engage in behaviors for a couple reasons. We engage in maladaptive behaviors or appropriate behaviors to escape something we don't like, whether that's somebody asking us to do something, or a bright light, or a loud sound, or a smell we don't like, or anything like that, to access something we do like. So that's common. You'll hear like denied access as a common antecedent, right? Somebody's engaging in a maladaptive behavior to gain access to something that they were previously said they couldn't have. They might engage in a behavior for some sort of sensory purpose, right? That we often describe sensory as it feels good. I twirl my hair, or I tap my feet, or I cross my legs, or something like that. And that's not mediated by anything social. You didn't have to say, "Great job crossing your legs, Sarah," to have me
Right.
keep
Yeah.
doing that.
Right.
You didn't have to do that. It didn't really have anything to do with anything social. And then the last function is attention. So whether that's saying, oh, hey, Sarah, don't cross your legs, and then you see that I'm doing it more, maybe that is what's reinforcing the behavior. Just any interaction.
Right.
We talk about, individuals on the spectrum who have a hard time communicating. It's sometimes easier to engage in something maladaptive that gets somebody to say, oh, hey, don't do that, as a form of social bid, than it is for me to, tap you or wave or anything like that.
More positive.
Yeah. So, then we would focus on some of those skills like gaining attention and requesting and all those sort of things.
Right.
Does that
Yeah.
answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah.
Why is it that some people with autism, and not all people with autism, engage in self-injurious behaviors sometimes?
That is a tough question. And I think that there's a lot of people doing research on that sort of thing right now. There's so much that we don't know yet about autism spectrum disorder. But what we do know is that varies on the spectrum, just like other things like communication ability, social ability, all those sort of things. It really varies. We come in and we, try to figure out what environmentally may be keeping the behavior going, but it's really hard to say what starts it at the very beginning,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, so relating to that, what can be done to help people with autism that, who may be aggressive or self-injurious?
Well, it really depends on the function of the behavior. And so, once we have that piece unlocked, then everything else starts flowing. We teach a lot of communication training. We call it functional communication training a lot, where we know the function of behavior, let's say, is to escape something. And so we'll teach them to ask for a break or something like that. We're taking the why that they're engaging in the behavior and we're replacing it with a communication response. So that's something we might do a lot. Sometimes, we can provide what we call extinction, which is we can just stop the reinforcement because we realized it's something in the environment that's being changed, so we can just stop that reinforcement from happening. Other times we're not able to safely do that, and we might go the more antecedent management route, which means we'll intervene before the behavior would happen. So if we know that somebody doesn't like loud sounds, we might, have them learn to wear headphones and tolerate something that might deafen that kind of, stimuli, so it doesn't affect them in that way.
And how often should an FBA be done?
Well, there's a bunch of different regulatory, factors involved. Different regulatory agencies have different opinions on that. But for me, I say, as often as it needs to be done. And by that I mean, if a behavior is consistently decreasing and it's maintaining at a low level, I feel pretty comfortable that I have the correct function of the behavior and my behavior support plan is working on that function of the behavior. But if I'm not having success, I might not have gotten the function correct. So I might want to do one before, in the IEP world, every 3 years is the golden standard.
That's gold standard.
But, we often will do them more frequently than that, especially if, we're seeing that behavior is not decreasing in the way that we want to. We haven't
Can't
figured
wait
it.
3 years.
No, we're not going to wait 3 years. Yeah, absolutely.
Sarah, thank you really so much. This has
Thank you very
been
much.
so
Thank you.
informative.
It has
We-
been.
Even
It
as
has been.
parents, especially understanding a lot of times these things are explained to us at meetings, but it's really nice to have you here and be able to
Thank
ask you
you.
some
Yeah, we
specific
appreciate it.
questions.
My pleasure. Thank you
So
for
thank
having
you so
me.
much.
Yes, thank
And
you.
thank you everyone for joining us. And please remember, we want to hear if you have ideas on topics. We'd love to hear your feedback. You can reach us at autismnewengland@gmail.com. So please let us know your thoughts and share your feedback and share your ideas. And thank you again, Sarah.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thanks,
Pleasure.
Sarah.
Thank you for having me.